right? What would be the basis of this judgment? Some could argue actually revenue might be as objective and neutral as any, right? Appropriately weighted for number of clients and so forth. So we are in the midst of a great deep democratic churning where in a sense you might say the revenue motive is actually being aligned to a great liberatory and churning force. Right? And I think we have to understand that if we want to create new and sensible forms of regulation for the professions. I'll just, a couple of more sort of points and then I'll just end. So there is this pressure of meritocracy as well, as is understood, right, in modern time. That is actually going to increase the pressure to align professional identities more to revenue than to peer-based, as it were, knowledge systems. There are two more aspects to this crisis of the professions, and these are common to all professions. That's why I'm not talking about the legal, which I just want to end, which is, the first is obviously the structure of education and professionalization. Now you might say, look, all that I've said is fine, but surely the answer to this lies in the fact that if you create structures of educating professionals, right, that inculcate habits, that inculcate qualifications, right, of the right kind, you might actually mitigate some of these pressures and dangers. It's no secret, particularly after the Vyapam scam, that in no profession in India can you say that the structure of education and preparation that lies behind that profession is in good shape. It's not in good shape partly for one reason that is particular to India. China is facing a similar problem, which is we haven't figured out a way institutionally of reconciling the quality and scale dilemma, right? Whenever a system of education expands rapidly, which we did, right? And frankly, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? I mean, I think even the generation of the 20-year-olds here sitting here has it easy. I mean, just imagine 5 to 10 years from now, you know, what the numbers are going to be if our gross enrollment ratio doubles, right? We don't have a strategy for creating a structure of institutions that can manage the scale and quality dilemma. The way other societies that passed through this modernization managed to do it was because they were doing it in a context that was not entirely democratic. So the way they do it was there was much more open acceptance of a hierarchy of institutions. So you know there'll be a lot of bad quality institutions, but you can create structures that insulate the good quality institutions from a low average quality. The theory was that over time, those quality institutions in a sense provide the raw material, right, that goes into teach and then over time improves the quality of the rest of the system. In our education system, whether it's university education, whether it's law, legal education, whether it's medical education, both of those feedback loops have broken down. What I mean by that is that, so there's a saying in academia that an institution is not as good as the best professor in it, it's as good as the least good professor in it, right? So because of the certain institutional location of our academic institutions, you have in a sense not been able to insulate even the top quality institutions from lowering the standard in a sense of the lowest, and the signaling quality of institutions has completely gone down. Today if somebody says I have a PhD from Delhi University, I have no idea what that means. Okay, it's India's top university, I have no idea what that means. It could be 70% plagiarized, or it could be, you know, groundbreaking global level in a sense work, right? And you have not created the pipeline, particularly in the legal profession, where in a sense top quality research can go back into the teaching profession raising those standards. I mean, it's, you know, everybody knows, right? If you actually held India's law colleges to teaching standards, minimal teaching standards, you'd have to close down about 500 of them, right? But where is the pipeline? Where is the institutional pipeline? And I'm always amazed that we allow politicians to practice in court, but not teachers to practice in court, right? But, yeah. So there is a quality scale dilemma that is now created such an extraordinary vicious circle, right? And we can talk about higher education led, but I think it's going to, it'll require your collective effort to think through. And the last and final point I'll make and end on this, which is again common to all professions. So, politicians at least have to talk the talk of reform, right? Even if they often don't deliver. Business at least has to adapt to changing circumstances, right? You have to create new products if there's competition, something. One of the most astonishing features about the sociology of contemporary India is that the most conservative organizational forms are these professions, right? These were supposed to be the vanguard of modernity, right? Higher education, take academia as a profession, right? There is no constituency amongst the professoriate for serious, meaningful higher education reform. If tomorrow there is a proposal for the reform of the legal profession and the system of justice delivery, guess who is going to be the biggest single political economy obstacle to actually getting that reform through, right? I mean, one of the things that's striking about in every other profession, even if reforms don't get done, there is a vanguard in that profession asking for reform, right? Now, why is this the case? I think this is something that SBCA in particular needs to diagnose, because otherwise you don't have a prayer for any kind of legal. I have one hypothesis I'll share with you and end with this. This is my hypothesis is this, that if you look at the structure of professional self-regulation, as I said, it had 2 or 3 characteristics. One, you had to have a knowledge claim, right? We want to insulate knowledge from extraneous considerations. Second, it depended upon a community identity that we are professionals, right? This is a group of lawyers. This is a group of doctors. We understand what that means. It requires certain norms, ethical obligations, so on and so forth. Now, here's the nasty question. If you have a profession where the disparities inside the profession are really of orders of magnitude, can that profession actually even be called a profession with a singular identity, right? So think of 2 scenarios. I'll use, there's a big debate in the US, for example, right? The idea of professors, right? The original profession, profess, right? When you had salary differentials of the ratio, and some salary differentials are absolutely inevitable based on quality, incentives, discipline. 1:4, 1:5, 1:6. You were in a sense still all part of, if you like, the same social structure, right? You were all middle class beings using knowledge as a means of social mobility and seeking justification and status through the acclamation of peers. If that ratio goes up to 1:20, right? What do you think is going to happen to the identity of that profession? Now, the big challenge, legal profession, it's no secret, is that distribution inside the legal profession, we have about 1 million odd lawyers, right? By 2030, right? That distribution is so, in a sense, skewed. We don't even know what it is actually, but the sense you get from little data there is, that it is hard to see, right, the bottom of the profession having solidarity with the top, right? It is hard to see the bottom of the profession even trusting that any knowledge-based reform in the profession is actually for the benefit of the profession, right? Because what they associate this disparity with is that this is going to be another tool of domination, right? Now, it's 101 in any profession, any professional identity. The more that internal disparity goes, the more harder it is going to be able to hold on to that idea that this is a profession governed by professional norms, not by anything else. Right? And I think one of the striking things about the Indian professional class in comparative perspective is, is that evidence seems to suggest that these disparities, and particularly if you overlay it on the social disparity, seems to be the highest compared to any comparable level of development. Right? So no wonder, right? And I think it is, it's not easy to see why people are suspicious of any reform. But this is the question I want to, in a sense, leave you with, right? Which is, does our conversation about professional identities and the crisis of the professions actually have to begin with a candid conversation about these kinds of issues? Right? My fear is that the structural traps all of the profession, I mean, higher education I've looked at for 10 years. It's the only thing that has made me lose my hair, if anything. The internal political economy is a far greater obstacle, right, to higher education reform. And I'm agnostic. It can be public, it can be private. That's a second order question, right? How do you create a constituency for reform within these professions? All of us are asking, media, academia, legal profession, medical profession, self-regulation, right? That is what is compatible with a knowledge society. That is what compatible with our freedom, right? Where is the evidence that this self-regulation has the minimal degree of social credibility that we can make this argument with a straight face? And I think the legal profession is going to be the interesting test case, because in some senses, this should be the easiest to reform. Right? It should be the easiest to reform because you have access to the state, it's the most articulate, vocal, in a sense, the crisis is kind of felt much more widely, right? But I think it's a question worth asking, why is it that, we are not even beginning to acknowledge these crises of the professions? So I think we are at this particular moment. Ogden Nash had this great line about professions, the social suspicion of professions, that professional men, they have no cares, whatever happens, they get theirs, right? That is, in a sense, the relationship of, I think, the rest of society to professions, right? And the crisis of legitimacy, trust me, it is getting deeper and is going to come. And we are at the really critical juncture. If there isn't a reform of the internal political economy, right? If the best and the brightest do not take up the task of running legal associations, being advocates for legal reform, right? Conducting this dialogue, which is going to be very difficult inside the profession, let alone outside, right? I'm afraid not only will we not have professional reform, but India's crisis of modernity, right, will deepen to proportions we haven't seen yet.
Many thanks, Mr. Bhanu Pratap Mehta. You have not just left us with one question. We'll just finish in 5 minutes. Can I request you to please switch off your phone? Thank you. You've not just left us with one question, but you've left us with a lot of things to introspect, ponder about. And all that I can tell you is, tomorrow the corridors of the Supreme Court, the outside corridors, and maybe even the inside corridors will be abuzz with this gossip that he speaks even better than what he writes. You had all of us captivated. So while you were talking generically about the professions, you had each one of us believe that it was all meant for us. May I now request all the members of the Executive Committee to please join us on the stage, and I request our President, sir, to please present a memento as a token of our appreciation to Mr. Pratap Bhanu Mehta for having spared his valuable intellect and insight and sharing his thoughts with us.
It's a very
1, it says that Supreme Court Bar Association to Mr. Pratap Bhanu Mehta, eminent thinker and constitutional expert, in deep appreciation of his top prices of the profession.
May I now request our Vice President, sir, to please propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Respected judges, respected seniors, respected colleagues in the bar and in the executive committee. I can wind up the vote of thanks by only saying that what Aishwarya said, that I adopt what you have said, namely, his thought, which was full of wisdom, has made us introspect about our profession. When I came here in the evening, there was a little confusion in my mind. The topic which was chosen, crisis of the profession or crisis in the profession. I think he has dealt with both the subjects. And very ably, maybe, as very rightly Aishwarya said, that he speaks better than what he writes. Maybe that he speaks with his heart and he is able to communicate with you directly, which I don't think he would be doing it while writing in the newspaper or other mode of communication. With this, once again, I say a big thanks to Mr. Mehta and also to our President for having taken this initiative. This is only the first step, because we have been pondering in the committee that we people who have really put in, say, 30, 35, 40 years, we have got a lot from this profession. We must give it back. And the seniors, definitely, they have the prime responsibility of doing that. That's why from next week onwards, rather in fact we had started that, where the seniors were requested to speak on various subjects, but unfortunately, for some reason, we have taken a break. I think it is going to continue, maybe from the next month. But about what Mr. Madhav Menon is going to, I think that's a wonderful opportunity for all of us. That in fact would help us to understand the profession better and to excel better. With this, thank you very much. Good evening. May I request everybody to join for a cup of tea. Thank you very much.